Now let me turn, and this is a perfect introduction for our next speaker, Nadia Calvin. I think we have the opportunity to have you with us. Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister, for being with us today. I know you were making a very important sacrifice as your government is just starting, but we have you here, and you have been, because you are in charge of the economy and the business in Spain, not only that, but you were also Director General for Budget in the European Commission. And now we have the opportunity to hear from you how Europe is going to deal with the Green Deal, which we are all looking forward. And it links with what Jeffrey Sachs is just saying, is how do we plan for the future in the sense that we don't get our structures locked in? What worries me today in Latin America is that we are investing in oil, we are investing in fossil fuels, and that's going to lock our structures, lock in for the next 20 years. So, my dear Prime Minister Nadia, you have the floor.
Yes, buenas tardes. Quería en primer lugar agradecer de todo corazón la amable invitación de Su Excelencia, Monseñor Sánchez Sorondo, a participar, volver aquí a Casina y participar en esta jornada de la Academia Pontificia de las Ciencias Sociales. Es un placer poder contribuir con la visión de España a una discusión tan necesaria y tan global con tantos colegas y expertos de alto nivel. Siempre que hablo, me refiero a la importancia fundamental de conseguir un crecimiento económico sostenible. Y como hemos estado comentando hoy, la sostenibilidad significa atender a las necesidades de las personas y de las sociedades. Yo creo que la sensibilidad social, la solidaridad, la justicia y la inclusión deben estar en el centro de nuestras políticas. En otras palabras, creo que no puede haber sostenibilidad económica y financiera sin sostenibilidad social y medioambiental. Son caras de la misma moneda y me ha satisfecho mucho escuchar a la hora de comer y a su santidad antes verdaderamente expresar esta misma idea con otras palabras, porque esta es la agenda de política económica que tenemos en España, este es el compromiso del Gobierno, es un compromiso apoyado por el Gobierno, el pueblo español, la población de nuestro país, y por eso es un gran placer participar en esta conferencia para hablar de crecimiento inclusivo y solidario. I will now switch to English. Just to emphasize some of the points that I have just put on the table, because one of the most pressing challenges is, to sustainable growth is obviously the climate emergency, and you were referring to this Green Deal. We are every day suffering the impact of global warming. Countries around the table are on the front line of this challenge. Actually, this is also the situation in Spain, I think France also. The Mediterranean is one of the core centers that is going to suffer from global warming, and I don't need to repeat the numbers that I'm sure have been put on the table on what the impact is in terms of people, in terms of GDP growth, in terms of productivity, in terms of welfare at the end of the day. So we fully share this feeling of being in an emergency situation, and we're also sharing the need to act with facts, with actions. And this requires courage, it requires determination, solidarity, leadership, and let me add, it requires financing, which is my cue probably. Because we need a comprehensive approach. We need to see how to internalize this negative externality. We've been mentioning taxes. I mean, Jeffrey Sachs was just talking about taxes. Taxes are also important elements to create a carrot or a stick approach to generate the right incentives. And we need to make sure that the whole of society, that citizens and businesses are moving in the right direction, knowing that we need to look forward in a 20-year prospect, whilst our political cycles are 4 or 5 years, and we are human, and despite the fact that we're in the Vatican, right? So we have the tools that we have at our hand. So the only way to face this, I think, is to see that it is a great challenge, but it is also a great opportunity. As you probably know, Spain hosted last December the COP25 in Madrid. Many colleagues joined us there. It was a great platform to listen to governments, to experts, to activists, And we saw there the many opportunities that there are in building a healthier, cleaner environment that we can leave to our children. There's an opportunity to develop new technologies to create high-quality jobs. Just in Spain, the estimate that we have in our National Energy and Climate Plan, which we submitted to the European Commission some months ago, included the estimate that we would have a potential 1.8% GDP increase by 2030 and a net employment increase of up to 1.7% through this climate transition. Not to speak, of course, of the savings derived from the improvement in public health, which could translate into a 25% reduction in premature deaths associated to pollution. So these are very tangible numbers, but for that we need large investments. Our estimate is that in Spain only we would need 100 billion euros in the coming 10 years, having to do with energy efficiency, renewable energy, smart networks, connection infrastructures, sustainable tourism, efficient use of land and water, and this involves all productive sectors, the whole of the economy. Obviously, the public sector has a key role to play, but we have to be very clear, this will require the mobilization of large amounts of private investment. The public sector alone cannot cope with these needs. Now, if we want to move to this green financing or to push this green financing forward, the first thing that we need to agree on is what is green. We need to avoid greenwashing. In that regard, I think a very important development is the agreement reached in Europe last December. Just when we were meeting in COP25, we were awaiting the outcome of the negotiations, which is what's known as the taxonomy, to determine what criteria can lead us to know this is green investment, this is not green investment. And I think in a way this European taxonomy could become the basis for a global standard in this regard. This is absolutely key if we want to mobilize this investment. There is a growing number and a growing interest in green bonds, but we need to make sure that they are green. Otherwise, there will be a backlash and investors will no longer trust this. So this is very important. Now, on top of these, as ministers of finance, we need to look at all the instruments to push this transition, the carrot and sticks I was referring to. This means carbon pricing, this means green budgeting, green financing, the review of our taxation system, design measures to avoid international carbon leakage. This is very delicate, very difficult. Every time I mention the CO2 border tax, which we're very strongly supporting at the EU level, well, WTO comes to mind. We need to find a way to avoid that we put very high standards and we invest in our countries, but that just means carbon somewhere else in the world, because climate change is a global challenge. And so ideally, we should apply this toolkit at the global level. I fully agree with Jeffrey in this regard that the World Bank, the IMF, the European Commission, the EIB, all international institutions have a key role to play because this is a global endeavor. And then finally, we will need to see into the incentives enshrined in the regulation of the financial sector, which I referred to over lunch. I know the ECB is very interested, the Basel Committee is very interested, so there's a lot of interest. Now we need to make sure that this, to be very blunt, and because we're here amongst friends, this does not result in 1,000 pages of very complex regulation that nobody can implement and even less so monitor. A final very tangible way to mobilize this finance is green bonds. And as I mentioned, in Spain, we have already seen a number of private companies, also public companies, and our National Development Bank has issued green bonds with great success. We are planning to issue green bonds this year as the Treasury of the Kingdom of Spain. We want to be based on the taxonomy and to start providing a basis for this green bond market, which I think is a great opportunity also in terms of financing. We are very committed to this agenda. We just have a new government in Spain, which has 2 new vice presidencies, 3 vice presidencies, I should say, new vice presidents. One is for the 2030 agenda, another one on social issues, another one is for digitalization. This is my vice presidency, and then the other one is the ecological transition. So these are our top priorities. This is what the government wants to focus on in the coming years. Our commitment is clear. Now we need to keep acting at national level and in international fora. It's very good that the international agenda with the European Green Deal and with the shared agenda that I see around the table is going in the right direction. It is key because the effects of climate change are more devastating on the poorest countries, on the poorest communities, and so we need to ensure that solidarity at national and at international level is playing in this regard. And so let me close with two main principles or two main issues that we need to look into if we want to be successful. First, we need to be aware of the time inconsistency. This has been mentioned in the previous panel, talking about budgets. It's even stronger when we talk climate change because the negative effects will be suffered short term, whereas the opportunities and maybe positive effects are mid to long run. This is an issue of intergenerational fairness, but we need to be very mindful of this time inconsistency of the positive and the negative sides of this equation. And the second key element is that the transition needs to be fair. We need to design mechanisms to protect citizens, to protect regions or sectors which are most directly affected so that no one is left behind. Public support is absolutely key, as the Minister Hayem from El Salvador was referring to. I think everybody is very envious of the 90% support. You know, these are policies which are potentially very divisive and which require bringing society with us. Otherwise, there will be a backlash, and this is a very serious risk, I think. And this intergenerational fairness and the need to bring people with us is the second key issue that we need to really be very aware of, because we are fully accountable on the things we propose and we decide. We're accountable to our citizens now, but we're also accountable to our children and to our grandchildren. So it is time to act. We need to do things now if we want to influence the future, to act for the planet, but also to act for ourselves. Let me close on this positive thought, and thank you very much for your attention. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. It is really so important, and I only want to make one comment, and that is the problem we are facing in Latin America and the Caribbean is that we are emitters of 8% of the greenhouse gases, and of course we have to do our part in mitigation, but we have a clear worry about adaptation. I think adaptation for us and I would say the solutions based on nature-based solutions are also part of what was agreed, for example, in Davos, the 1 trillion trees that will be planted around the world, which is also very important. But the thing is, we feel, sometimes in my region, we do feel that we have an urgent need to have more methodologies, for example, to measure carbon export and imports, how much goods and services are coming into our countries that are carbon intensive. And if you're thinking about this carbon tax in the border, that is something that worries us a lot. You can imagine that because, you know,